Has Gard cracked the code to building teams in this portal era? Let's talk about it. Plus, scouting Will Garlock. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings. I appreciate the absolute hell out of every one of you for coming here, being a part of this community, watching the show, supporting it. I mean, I don't say this as much anymore because I think people know, but the goal of this show is always to make it better to be a Badger fan. That's it. Whatever I could humbly contribute to making it a better experience to be a Badgers fan, that's what this has always been about. It's what always this community's been about. The people in the Discord, this show, this channel, the interviews, getting people on, elevating other voices. It's always been about how do we make it better to be a Badger fan? How do we build community? And I appreciate the absolute heck out of every single person that's part of this because we're doing this together. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's talk about it. Today's episode, we are talking about, I realize I didn't update my media on the side there, but that's fine. Today's episode, we are talking about Gard building this roster as he kind of unlocks some of the science of building a roster in the portal NIL era. We are talking about scouting Will Garlock. I went to see him play live, 2026 Badgers commit, big man out of Middleton, Wisconsin. And then some of your comments, including some really interesting ones that I want to get into. But first, let's talk about this Badgers roster. Let's talk about this Badgers basketball roster, how it was built, what Gard did. I want to start here. Like, the idea that you can't build culture in basketball and football in this era is bullshit. I almost just said a word I shouldn't say. It is BS. You can absolutely build culture if you emphasize it. That's what Gard has built culture into this team. And you can see it with Kamari McGee. You can see it with Carter Gilmore. You can see it with the bench. I do want to point out, as P says in the comments here, P, what's up, my friend? He says, my boy Chris Chambers, today's episode is unofficially brought to you by Chris Chambers, the great former Badgers receiver. Culture is so important, and I think it's more important now. I've talked about this before. In an era where more and more players are just leaving, where you're not invested in programs, where you don't have guys 3-4 years, the ability to build culture in a roster, it's more important than it ever has been. And that's what Gard has been able to do on this team. We're going to break out kind of some of the ways he's done it. But if he can continue to build culture, it's going to make him more unique in this era of basketball. And it's going to make him even better. I think it used to be more common, like culture builders, people who would build culture in their teams. It's harder and harder now. And the fact that he's able to do it is part of the reason why this team is so good. You know, I went to a coaching clinic when I was coaching, and there was a D2 basketball coach who won state titles, was really, really good. And he said his culture was worth 5 to 6 points a game, 5 to 8 points a game. It's just something that they thought that because their players played harder, they were more bought in, that they gained 5 to 6 points a game just based on culture. And that's what this team is. This team is a really good culture team. It doesn't fold. It's got guys that are bought in. It's got guys that care about the program. And I think it's what, if you go back to Coach Cal at Kentucky, what he always missed was having a couple players that were really invested in the program. It was just high-profile transfers. And sure, he built some great teams, but he missed having a guy like a Kamari McGee or a Carter Gilmore. Let's look at how this team was built. So I broke this out into 3 categories. I called them the organics. I don't know why, but the organics, the guys that were recruited out of high school that have been built here, John Blackwell, Carter Gilmore, Stephen Crowl, Nolan Winter, Jack Janicki. We're only looking at the rotation guys right now. That's only 2 4-star guys, right? Carter Gilmore was a preferred walk-on. Janicki was a preferred walk-on. John Blackwell is a 3-star. And then you have low 4-star guys kind of in Stephen Crowl and Nolan Winter. So you can build a successful team here without recruiting at the highest level if you're finding hits. Coach Gard has proven that. Then you have the long-term buys. I'm going to call it the long-term buys. The long-term buys are guys that Gard went in the portal but found long-term solutions. And the long-term solutions that fit the culture, right? Max Klesmit, Kamari McGee. Wisconsin guys that got away, that care about the program, that he bought in. You look at in 2024, Jack Doherty went to Illinois State. That's a Wisconsin guy. That's the type of guy that maybe in a year they look back at a guy like that to bring him back in. And he's another version of Max Klesmit, of Kamari McGee. Again, building that culture, bringing in guys from the state that care about the state, that are going to play a little bit harder because they're home, and then augmenting that with what I call the portal fixes, guys like John Tonje, AJ Storr last year, right? There's been misses for sure because you're never going to bat 100. Cameron Hunter hasn't really played this year. A lot of that's injury related. You go back to, some high school misses on this roster. Marcus Silver has never really quite got to the point that they wanted. Certainly, Chris Hodges has not developed to the point that they wanted. Certainly, there's been a couple other misses that you could talk about, but I think this is how you build a roster now if you're Wisconsin, right? You still rely heavily on scouting, developing high school players. You augment it with a couple really smart culture guys from the portal that can grow with the program, guys who you're going to mid-major schools, you're going to lesser Power 4 schools, and you're finding freshmen and sophomores that you can pick off that roster that can grow with your high school kids. That's the Kamari McGees and the Max Klesmits. And then every year you're just sniping a piece that you need, a piece or two that you need, a Tonje, an Amos, an AJ Storr last year, and you're just filling in the blanks, a Chris Vogt, right? And Gard has done a really good job of doing that. Now he's got to continue doing it, and you have to keep hitting in the recruiting cycle. We're going to talk about Will Garlock in a second, and Zach Kingens in a second in next year's class, but it's been really impressive. And again, I go back to the idea that, and I want to get into some of your comments here in a second, but I want to go back to this idea that you can't build culture. I think it's just BS. You can absolutely build culture if you care about it. And Gard has proven that. This team has a ton of culture, and you see it in Daniel Freitag, who hasn't played, 4-star recruit, much ballyhooed, much hyped. You pan to the bench, nobody's more into it than Freitag, right? That's a sign of a guy who's bought in. That's a sign of good culture. I'm telling you right now, if you want to look if a team is healthy, look at the bench. Look at the bench. Coach K, and people can think whatever they want about Coach K at Duke. They can hate him. They can dislike him. They can call him rat face, whatever. One time he was talking, one of his former players was talking, there was a point guard. I forget who the guy was, but he said one game Coach K just videotaped me on the bench. And then he showed me what I looked like on the bench. That's what I had to do. I had to go back and look at how I acted on the bench. And it was terrifying. I was horrible. It's one of the best lessons he ever taught me. You look at this Badgers bench, and those guys are engaged. They're fired up. It's not just the end of the bench guys. It's the guys like Daniel Freitag. This team has built culture, and Greg Gard gets a ton of credit for that. JB says it's just you and JB. Oh, we got a few other people here, JB. Will Hanna says he's here. Always love when Will and JB join. G6 says love being a Badger fan. Let's see what else we got here. Will Hanna says as long as this team has shooters, they can compete. Agreed. Let's see what else we got here. G6, I predicted Jack Robeson emergence next year. Robeson's going to be super interesting. Robeson is a taller shooter, got him out of Minnesota. Really good length, lefty, good range. You're looking at next year's roster, and you're going to be losing, a Klesmit. You're going to be losing a Tonje. You're going to be losing shooting off this roster. Robeson's going to play. Robeson's going to be a player. He's not a great athlete. He's not a great playmaker. Think of him as like a Douye Dukin type, but that's a really valuable piece. And I'm telling you now, it's even more valuable the way this offense plays. The way this offense has valued shooting, spacing. A piece like Robeson's even more valuable. He's got a great carrying skill set, which is shooting. He's got great length. I like him a lot. I was able to talk to him. Thought he made a big jump from his junior to senior year. That's the type of player that's going to be a pain in the butt for opposing teams just because he's going to space the floor. Probably like a 9. Like he's never going to be an elite player, I don't think. I don't ever want to put a cap on guys before seeing them play at the college level. But yeah, I think he has a very good chance of being a solid player. I agree with you, G6. All right, let's take a break here. I want to talk about a guy coming into next year's class that could potentially fill a hole that we've talked about on this roster for a long time. I got to see him play in person. I'm talking about Will Garlock. That's coming up next, Locked On Badgers. But first, today's episode brought to you by our good friends over at Gametime. We just got to get out and do more things. And I know we can get busy. Like I'm talking like to you right now, but I'm really talking to me in a mirror as well. I know we can get busy with the day-to-day, the mundane. Got to do all this stuff. I got a honey-do list, kids, basketball. Got to brush my teeth every day. Like it's a lot, man. Being an adult is a lot. But the ghost of Ryan past is like, go do some stuff. What are you doing? The ghost of Ryan future is going to be upset if I don't go do those things. So I want to do more things. Like truthfully, like I want to do more stuff in 2025. And I would love all of you to do more stuff as well and save money doing it. And the best way to do that is Gametime. Gametime has all the tickets you need. Great events, flash deals. You don't have to save up months in advance or plan months in advance. You can, on a whim, man, pull something out of a hat and say Monster Truck Rally. Gametime, let's go do it. Let's do more things in life. Gametime is a great way to do it. Pictures of the seats before you sit down, great inventory, great prices, easy purchasing. Plus, you get a great deal with our offer. You're going to save even more money. Snag the tickets without the stress over at Gametime. Download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create the account. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply over at our great friends at Gametime. All right, let's jump back into this. Let's talk Will Garlock for a second. Okay, so I had a chance to go down to Middleton, Wisconsin. It was a super long day. I'm also, side note, I could never be like an over-the-road trucker because when I am left off the premises of my house, I just eat like a 12-year-old. Like I stop at Quick Trip, I get like donut holes and Kit Kats and Skittles. I get to the game and I got Skittles there. On the way back, I got McDonald's and like this Rice Krispie bar thing. Like it's a disaster. But let's focus on Will Garlock, right? So Will Garlock, 7 foot, 235 pounds, a high 3-star, the Middleton, Wisconsin, coming in next year's class. So let's start with the good. I got to see him play. The good is that the size is legit. The size, he is a legit 6'11", 7 foot. He's got good size already, good length, long levers, big hands. Like he's legitimately going to come in and give Wisconsin size. Again, look at next year's roster, right? You have Steven Crowl leaving. Who's the 5? And I'm not suggesting Will Garlock steps in next year. But what I am suggesting is you have a size deficit. You have a post deficit on this team. And now you have Steven Crowl leaving next year. For everybody, and I'm looking at all of y'all who have been like, Steven Crowl's kind of soft, and I want a different type of center. Be careful what you wish for. Like, I'm with you, Steven Crowl, and my boy Will in the chat is probably going to call him 13-year Steve. I'm with you. He's not perfect, but they better replace him because I don't know who's going to be the 5 next year. I don't think you want Nolan Winter banging all game long against other 5s. So Garlock is the type of guy I comp him a little bit to a Chris Vogt. Good size, good mobility. Defensively, I think his upside is he can cover a lot of space. He can close out on shooters. Had a couple nice possessions of that in this game where he's getting on the perimeter. He's moving his feet. He's mirroring well. Really long wingspan. I saw him contest threes in the corner from basically off the skip pass, right, to go from the middle of the zone to contest in the corner, arms up. I like that. I like the defensive mobility. I like the defensive versatility, the way the Badgers play defense with their drop coverage. You want somebody who can be a little athletic, who can challenge, who can move. I think defensively he gives you a lot of, maybe if you look at his upside, what Chris Vogt gave you in limited spurts in his 1 year in Madison. Passing ability. Let's stay on the good here. Some really nice passes. Like Garlock, that was probably the most surprising thing to me watching him live because I knew he had size. I watched him in the huddle clips, 2 or 3 clips where I was just like, wow, that's a really nice pass for a high school big man. He caught 2 or 3 on the left block and I forget who they played. It's blanking, but the other team would double him and he would just whip a skip pass to the other side, open 3. Really good job looking for shooters, being patient. Had another one where he hit a cutting guard off of the bounce pass, really quick decision, bounce pass into the pocket for a layup. Good passer as a 5. In that sense, a little bit of what Crowl gives you, not at that level, but a pretty good passer. Let's talk a little bit about the downside. Let's talk a little bit about what I didn't love watching Will Garlock play. Didn't see much perimeter shooting. And from an offensive standpoint, I think he's got a ways to go. I think he can hit free throws. His free throw form looked good. He got to the line a couple times, had a couple dunks, but finished with like 10, 11 points offensively against a team that he was quite a bit bigger than. I don't think he dominated quite as much offensively as I would have liked to have seen. Now, I want to be fair. I talked to his head coach before the game. I talked to him. Both said he was a little under the weather, so I don't think he was definitely a little under the weather. But even at his best, I don't think this is a really skilled big. This is not a big that's probably going to stretch the floor. This is not a big you're going to dump it down to and he's going to get 18 and 10. This is probably more like, as he develops, a 10 and 10 guy for the Badgers and great guard. And that's valuable. Like if he hits that ceiling, that's a really nice piece in the middle. And what I said at the beginning to transition into this point was the Badgers have missed a guy like that in the middle. They've missed a guy who can be a little physical, who can block shots, who can give them some size and some toughness. I think Garlock can give them some of that. I just think offensively, a little more limited. Not a great athlete. I think good mobility, but not a great athlete vertically. So not a John Lure type of an athlete who's really going to move really well. He's, again, a little bit more of a 5, a little more anchored to the ground at times. And then I don't know if there's a lot of perimeter shooting there. So that's kind of the good and bad. It's tough for high school big men in Wisconsin when they're getting doubled and triple teamed a lot. That happened a lot in this game. He would get the ball, turn baseline to get into his move, and they would instantly send 2 or 3 people. That's tough. He's not going to see that at the college level, so it's a little hard to evaluate at times. But again, I would call it a pretty high floor defensive guy, toughness guy who should be able to thrive on some putbacks. All right, let's jump into some comments here. I am going to see Zach Kinzinger on Friday. Really excited about that one. Really excited about that one. Okay, let's get some more ones here. More comments. People get talking about playground basketball. I love it. Logan says, I live in some prairie, seen him play a lot. He needs to develop. Yeah, I think that's really fair. I think he's not a guy who's going to step in right away. I think he needs to develop. I think the frame is there and the foundation is there to be a solid Big Ten post guy. Gabe says Winter's a 4. I agree with that. Will Hannah says Crowl will be back. He'll be 14-year Big Steve. Listen, I would love it. Crowl makes his team better. I say it all the time. He's one of the more underappreciated Badger players. That's just my opinion. I think people disagree with that. Gabe says he can't wait for Garlock. I think Garlock's going to need a year. So again, that goes to the portal. Just like they sniped Tonje this year, they're going to have to snipe a 5 next year somewhere. They have to get a 5. They have to get a physical 5 next year. Where that is, I don't know, but they're going to have to find somebody. JB says Crowl is good. This team goes as Crowl goes. Most important player on the team. Horrible haircut, though. Most important player on the team. That's interesting. I think it probably. Gosh, I think it is probably. I think it's Tonje or Blackwell, and then Crowl. I think so. Here's the thing with Tonje and Blackwell: the presence of both of them makes it hard for the defense to completely take either away, which makes them both really important. You don't really need either of them to go off at the same time. It's the presence of the other that allows both of them to thrive, right? I would call it the Johnny Davis syndrome. Like when Johnny Davis was on this team, he didn't have anyone else to really take a ton of pressure off him. So defenses really started loading up. They started hard hedging. They started doubling. They started blitzing him. And it got really hard for him towards the end of the season because defense just said, we don't care who else shoots the ball. You're not going to beat us. On this team, Tonje and Blackwell provide some balance to each other. I think that's a point that's not brought up a lot, even when Blackwell has a bad game or Tonje has a bad game. The fact that they are both there on the court balancing it out makes it really tough for defenses. If you were to take one of those away, I think the other would struggle a lot more. And I think they're the engine of the team. So I think those are your 2 most valuable pieces, most important pieces. But I think Crowell's next. I really do think Crowell's your 3rd most important piece on this team. Will Hannah says, I agree. Garlock could be an 8 or 8 to 10, 10 to 8 type guy. I agree. I think that's the ceiling. I think that's where he is. I don't want to throw hot water on it. And I'm never going to cap a guy. He's not even in college yet, but I just don't think he has the skill or athleticism to be like a big time player. But if you get a 10 and 8 guy, that's super valuable. And it's going to be a 10 and 8 guy that gives you a little bit more toughness and size in the middle, which I think this team absolutely needs. Let's see. Keep going here. Not a 3-point shooter. I agree. Kevin Garibaldi says, what is the ceiling for Winter and Blackwell? I'm hoping that Daniel Freitag really improves over the summer and we have 3 solid starters. Ceiling for Winter and Blackwell. I think Winter has a higher ceiling than so I've comped Winter a lot to John Lure. Like I still think that's like the ceiling for Winter. And John Lure was an 8 or 9 year NBA guy. Like he had his initial contract, then he re-signed with the Pistons, and I think he got like $40 million. He wasn't a star in the NBA, but he was a really solid rotational guy for like 8 years. I think that's the ceiling for Winter, and that means he's an all Big Ten first team player. He's an NBA draft pick. He's in the league for 8 to 10 years. I think that's the ceiling for Winter. A stretch 4 who can bang shots, who can take over games because the small guys can't guard him down low and the big guys can't guard him on the perimeter. Tough, athletic, the focal point of an offense. I think that's Winter's ceiling. I think it's John Lure. I think it's some version of John Lure. Blackwell's interesting to me because athletically, again, they need a point guard, man. I keep going back to it. We're going to get into that comment next. Someone made a comment about it, and I agree. They need a point guard because Blackwell, I'm telling you, he's not a point guard. And I think if you had a steady point guard on this team, that's another spot I hope they look to in the portal next year, where if you get a point guard, you can shift Blackwell more to the 2. I'm trying to just think roster construction. Who would be the 3 because you lose Tonje? I don't know. I think Blackwell's a 2. You're looking at a guy who is kind of a Nigel Hayes tier. I mean, certainly I'm trying to think of the tier for John Blackwell, like a fringe NBA guy, but probably not athletic enough to make the cut. I mean, certainly way different players. They play different positions, but I think he's that type of tier of player who is just almost good enough to get to the NBA, right? And ends up carving out a great career in Europe. I just think the athleticism for Blackwell isn't quite at the NBA level for the spot he's going to play, and he's not as big as the NBA wing. So to me, he's like a Nigel Hayes tier, and I love Nigel Hayes. Like, Nigel Hayes is one of my favorite Badgers. He was brilliant as a basketball player. So I think that's the tier that I would put Blackwell in. But I'm super curious if you guys agree or disagree with that. Let me know in the comments where you guys have those tiers, and if I'm off or if I'm on. I would love to get feedback on that. All right, we're going to take a quick second and talk about, do they need to do something at that point guard spot to keep Blackwell on the roster? That's coming up next. Locked on Badgers. Let's talk about it. Your comments next. But first, a quick break for friends of the show over at Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the ultimate in daily fantasy. And anytime you put ultimate before something, you know it's got to be good. I'm throwing ultimate before Prizepicks. Like, if the ultimate burger has bacon on it, this is the ultimate in DFS. It's over at Prizepicks. Again, there's no better way to make it more exciting with Prizepicks daily fantasy. Over 10 million members, billions with a big B in winnings awarded. Prizepicks makes it fun and simple to get on the action. Here's how it works. You don't have to compete in the shark-filled pool of normal fantasy where there's all these crazy people that read every single magazine and they're like automatons breaking down PPR. You're just picking more or less on statistical categories. It's just you against the numbers. That's it. More or less on touchdowns, yards, receptions. It's as simple as that over on Prizepicks. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege. You're going to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. All right, let's jump back into this here. I had a bunch of comments from the YouTube channel that I want to get into. This is from Family Man. He said, Blackwell will transfer if we don't find a point guard. That's not his natural position. This is kind of what I hit on earlier. Family Man, thanks for the comment. I don't know if he's going to transfer or not, but it's not his natural position. Like, they have to get a point guard. I think it's a big emphasis this offseason. I know they thought maybe Daniel Freitag would be a little more ready this year. Cam Hunter would be able to step in. Cam Hunter's been hurt. I think next year you go in this portal, you're looking for a 5 and a point guard. Big needs at both those spots, in my opinion. And some of that will depend on how Freitag develops over the offseason. Some of that will depend on a guy like Winter. I think Winter's still going to be a 4, but Amos has another year. Maybe Winter can grow into that 5, and you're good with that. If Amos takes a jump, that'd be an interesting solution potentially, and then you just need more depth there. But yeah, man, I agree with you, Family Man. I'm not necessarily in the fact that he's going to transfer, but I think they got to find a point guard. I think they have to find somebody to help get guys like Blackwell into a better spot so he doesn't have to take as much of the playmaking role onto himself. Okay, a couple more questions here. This is from Prine. He said, I was PO'd at Blackwell, end a half shot and foul 2, but he did shoot it with just 3 seconds left. He couldn't run down more. Again, talking about the end of the half and the lack of execution there, I'm fine with Blackwell's shot, but he just can't foul after it. You can't foul with 2 seconds left and Indiana's on the other side of the court, right? It's just, once again, a lack of execution at the end of half. I agree with you, though, Prine. It's a good point. I agree with you in terms of, like, I'm kind of fine with when he shot it. Prine also says, I really like that the ball isn't going into Crowl very often. Once he starts his snail pace moves into the basket, everything else just stops. He is much more valuable as a facilitator. So here's what I would say with that. Like, his snail pace moves are also how he gets into his facilitation. Like, so if you like him being a facilitator, you kind of have to live with I would call it deliberate. Let's call it deliberate instead of snail paced. But if you like him as a facilitator, you got to kind of live with the deliberate pace that he plays with, because Crowell's a lot of things. Being quick and twitchy is not necessarily one of them, unfortunately. Okay, let's see here. This is from an IU fan, Indiana fan. I like this. He said, Wisconsin is a well-coached team. Still very solid after losing 2 very talented players. Important part here. Be grateful for what you have. IU is a hollow shell of a basketball program. That's from John Mandel. Yeah, that hits, right? That hits. Mark says, I love Mark, by the way. Mark says, Ryan, I like you. I root for you hosting this show. But there is something that doesn't taste well when your team's locked on host outright says you're never going to compete for a championship. So I respect that. Like, Mark, I respect that point. I respect that opinion. And this was in reference to a comment I made about the football side, not the basketball side necessarily, but the football side, where I just said, I don't think we're going to compete for a national title. I didn't say conference title, but I don't think we're going to be real contenders. And I don't think that's that crazy of a take. Like, I just, outside of an outlier season, when has any team like Wisconsin really competed for a title? It's not just a Wisconsin thing. It's just the reality of it is I'm not going to blow smoke. Like, I lean optimist. Y'all know that, but I'm not going to blow smoke. The reality is the teams that compete for national titles are Notre Dame, Ohio State, Texas, Florida, Georgia, USC when they had Pete Carroll. Like, what's the common denominator here? They're all blue bloods. Michigan, Penn State, they're all blue bloods. Now, certainly a Washington gets in there once in a while. A Michigan State got into the playoffs when it was a 4-teamer. But it's just really hard for non-blue bloods to compete in that level. And it's, in some ways, it's harder in the playoff era than it ever has been because you have to win more games. Now, it's easier to get there, but it's harder because now you run a gauntlet. And until, listen, we won 5 games last year. We're so far away. And I love Wisconsin, man. I bleed red. I'm telling y'all, I like we all do in the chat. We're so far away that it's hard for me to say that's a spot we're going to compete for. And I would love to be wrong on that. Nothing would make me happier. So I totally get your point, Mark. I'm not trying to be douse cold water on any optimism flames. And by the way, I'd also say I have a lot of fun in seasons where we don't compete for the championship if we have a good year. Like, I can enjoy the hell out of a 9-3 season where we beat Minnesota, we beat Nebraska, we have a tough loss against Penn State. Maybe Ohio State blows us out, but we're good. We're competitive. We're solid. We're tough. We beat up on some teams. We win the axe. I'm not saying I'm good with settling. I'm not trying to get participation trophies, but I also really enjoy the process of a season if it's a good season. And maybe that's where I'm different than people. I don't know. I think everybody's different on that. Family Man says this was in response to when Max left. Ryan wanted to use some words that were banned on Locked On. Yeah, man, there's some words that because I said it, like, I don't think losing Max Steinecker is a death blow to the program, but he's really good at what he does. He's a great human being, and it hurts. I'll say that. I talked to a guy in the recruiting world about Max the other day. I haven't even talked about this, but he said, yeah, it's a big loss for Wisconsin. Like, that's a hard one to replace. So make no mistake, losing Max is a big deal, but they have to replace him. All right, let's get some more of your comments here. L. Mills, I miss Outback Bowl wins. I hear, right? I miss Capital One Bowl wins. Like, 100%, man. Yes, absolutely. G6 says, well, everybody bleeds red technically. Thank you. You are not incorrect. Will Hannah, they will win double digits in 26, and we'll be here for it. We will be here for it. Bigger and better than ever. We have a really fun Locked On Badgers announcement coming up. I think a way to add more to this channel and a way to add somebody to this channel, which I think y'all are going to like. So that's coming up too. Pedro says, if you don't win enough blue chip guys, you don't win a natty. Pedro nailed it. I mean, it's as simple as that. And it's really hard for Wisconsin. It's not a Wisconsin. I keep coming back to it. It's not a Wisconsin thing. It's literally an all of college football thing outside of like 12 schools. And 12 schools typically just don't recruit enough blue chips to consistently compete for titles. And it's as simple as that. It's not deeper than that. You can have a great coach. You can have a great everything. And if you're not a blue blood, you're not going to have enough talent on the roster typically. Now there's outliers, right? If you hit the quarterback, if you nail the quarterback spot, that can erase a lot of gaps and a lot of deficits in spots. If you have a really healthy season, you get lucky. Like, there's ways to do it, but it's one of those I kind of got to see it before I'm going to say we can do it type of a thing. Let's see what else we got here. A couple more comments on Kinzinger. Hey, Jensen, Kinzinger is such a Badger type player. Excited. I think he's going to be really good. I think Kinzinger is going to be really good, but there's things you see when you're watching in person that you don't get off film. I've only seen Kinzinger on film. I haven't seen him in person, so I'm really excited to see him in person. I'm going to be able to talk to him. I'm going to be able to talk to his coach. I think I'm going to have a really good feel, at least a much better feel, I should say, after watching him. But yeah, like, he's the type of scorer they need. In-state kid. I think that's going to be an interesting one. Let's see what else we got here. Any other comments? P says start Kamari. I just think he needs to play more. Again, like, I hear you. Like, I'm not arguing with you, P, and I think a lot of people would agree with you on that one. I just think it's about minutes. I would rather him play more. I don't mind starting Klesmit because I think if you take him out of the lineup, it creates a bit of a distraction in a way. I'd say this: players like starting. A lot of players they care about it. It matters. If you take him out when he's been starting for a long time, multiple years, I think it maybe creates a bit of a distraction, a bit of a talking point that you don't want to do, especially as Klesmit's coming off his best game in a while. So I wouldn't do that. I understand the sentiment. I don't think it's an unfair sentiment, but I would play McGee more. Excuse me. I would give him more minutes for sure. All right, let's wrap it there. Again, really do appreciate all you guys. Will says, I will really like Kins. I'm excited to see him, man. Hopefully you can make it. Will, come down with me. Let's watch them together, man. Open seat for sure. Let's do it. We'll eat some McDonald's on the way back. Logan Bro says, like I said, I've seen him in person. This guy lives up to the hype. I can't wait. I cannot wait. All right, we will wrap it up there on Wisconsin. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Really do appreciate everything. Just let me reiterate what I said at the top. This whole channel is about making it better to be a Badger fan in some small way. Like I don't want to overstate anything I do. Like I don't want to like say that I make it better, but that's the goal. A place we can build community, hang out. We have a big hangout coming up for the Oregon game. I'm really excited about. We're going to walk into the Kohl Center together with like 20 people, all part of this community. I'm excited to do more of that stuff and to help people just enjoy being a Badger fan more. That's the whole goal. So for everyone that's here, you're part of that, and I appreciate you on Wisconsin. And yeah, as Realist said, good show. Go get some sleep. I am drained. Yeah, I have no idea. So that is what's next on the docket for Ryan on Wisconsin, and we will talk later. Appreciate you guys so much. And yeah, let's wrap.